Hello and welcome, listeners and viewers. This is 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. And if you've listened to or watched my podcast before, you'll know really well that I love connecting with and hosting conversations with fellow coaches to promote both coaching and to promote coaches, as well as sharing my love and value of learning. So this is series 4, and the focus is on neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. And the title of the series is Inside NLP Lessons from Practitioners. Do you know, I'm going to have to keep repeating this to myself because I'm still not getting it quite right. Life lessons from practitioners. So if you're trained in or are training in the use of NLP, or maybe you're just fascinated by the concept, I really hope that this is of value to you. So in the first episode, I gave an explanation of NLP that I based on information I got from the Association of NLP's website. But I have decided that each time we have an episode, I'm going to ask the guests to describe their understanding of NLP. And if you remember, I'd said that it's not usually used independently from other interventions, but it's really valuably integrated into coaching conversations. So, to introduce my guest this week, we met through the Ultimate NLP Practitioner Program that is offered by Damon Cart online. And for quite some months now, and pretty much on a weekly basis, we've been sharing NLP strategies and techniques and exercises, as well as holding each other quite firmly to account on some of our business development ideas. So my guest is a master practitioner in NLP. Welcome, 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 Lars Osterby.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So how are you doing today,
I'm
Lars?
excited. I'm well, thank you. I've been
Good.
looking forward to be here and talk with you about, you know, NLP and the journey,
Yes, the
the
journey.
journey
I'm
of
so
it.
glad
Yeah.
that you're on this episode. It's really nice to have a master practitioner. And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Lars, and just ask you, when you're talking to clients or when people ask you, what is this NLP stuff? What do you say?
Yeah, I tend to keep it simple, but because in NLP is very broad. Um, so but but for me it's really about I would say finding the resources and the answers that we already have in us, and to really help the client find these resources and answers within themselves, so they can change their life in a more positive direction. So I and NLP stands for neuro linguistic programming. So you can say in a sense it's about reprogramming, some of our beliefs, or often limiting beliefs, but in a more positive and more positive way.
Mhm.
So our lives, become broader and richer, when we overcome these limitations about ourselves. But I think we will talk more about that during the podcast. But
Yes.
it has a new linguistic and neurological, you can say, aspect to it.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And I like how you started there by saying, well, let's keep it simple because it is, as you say, a really broad topic. It's got so many different components
Yeah.
to it. Um, Something I wanted to ask you based on what you just said there. So I was saying that to a client just recently, exactly that my and yours and NLP practitioners' belief that we do have the resources available
Mm,
to us that we need in order to do the things we want to do, but sometimes they're just not very accessible to us for different reasons.
right.
And they said to me, "What do you mean by resources?" So So that would be useful, I think, just to say here, what do we mean by when we say resources in an NLP context?
Yeah, resources. To me, it can be, for example, positive experiences from the past that we kind of that we can reuse, in a new context, and also, feelings and emotions that um, that has been suppressed, for example, or that we kind of get in contact with feelings, emotions, areas, experiences from past life, or from yeah, from our lived life, but can help us in a current situation, and typically to overcome, a problem or a challenge, that we are facing now.
Mm,
Um, but with yeah, neurological and linguistic tools, we can maybe, how do you say, approach this challenge, and see it, maybe in a new light. For example, if we can start to see it as a learning process or a journey, something that can help us, on our way, through life.
mm,
So I think it has a lot to do with how we see our lives, and what happens in our lives. So we, you know, yeah, for example, it can be, an injury, from playing football, for example, that can be very, of course, challenging, to recover. And but with the right mindset and the right tools, this can actually be a journey, and um, for the client, and even a way to have a richer life, and with a better understanding of themselves and their surroundings.
mm.
So I you can say that there's, of course, a lot of self-development
Yes.
involved in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good reminder to me actually that I think, well, I certainly forget, and I think we do forget that quite often we have been through experiences, or we have got skills or knowledge or
Mm.
qualities that we've not used, that are transferable into new situations. And
Right.
sometimes it takes for us to be, as you say, taken back to that memory or reminded by somebody else that we do have
Mm.
these particular qualities
Mm.
that can be
Right.
brought forward.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about a new situation like a physical injury.
Yeah.
Uh, it was occurring to me as you were talking that sometimes we can find new resources, we can find new qualities that maybe
Exactly.
we didn't know we had
No.
in order to overcome a new
Yeah.
situation. Hmm,
Exactly.
yeah. So
So.
I know, Lars, that you wanted to talk a bit about what we're what we've been doing together, you and I, when we've been meeting
Mm.
weekly, and the notion that we're wanting to use our NLP professionally. Tell us what you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, in my case, I could see that this could be applied to physical recovery, the area of physical recovery, because for some reason, this area has been quite divided, in the physical aspect, and less in like a psychological or mental aspect.
Hmm.
So I was kind of curious and interested in a more like holistic approach to physical recovery, because to me it's quite obvious that if you're not in a low life state, it's more difficult to recover physically. And if you can help the patient, um, to reach a higher life state or mental state, the patient will also recover easier physically.
Mm.
And often we have, some blockage, call it psychological blockages, or people in physical recovery, maybe they have traumas related to something that happened. So I think it's very relevant,
Mm.
to see it, in a holistic manner. And but for some reason, I feel a bit like a pioneer. It's a kind of yeah. It's not really well discovered yet. So it's also yeah. A journey for me. I feel like I'm one of the front runners for
Yeah,
this.
that's brilliant.
So yeah,
And
so
so,
you can say that gives it like a certain meaning of mission, even, because
yeah,
I'm sure that potentially this can help a lot of people, out there. And I think that's also an important point in NLP, that it's really about helping other people overcome or recover or something,
yes.
and
I mean, so
yeah, so
obviously, I know a little bit about how you arrived at this mission, if you like.
right,
Um, but it might be useful for listeners to hear a bit about how you ended up in coaching, how you ended up in NLP, and how this, because I know you're such a massive ideas person.
right, yeah, I like
How
to,
did you end up with it?
that's not a problem to get, ideas. That's not been a problem. Um, yeah, I mean, my background is I'm a teacher, and I went to university and studied education there, and I, yeah, worked as a school teacher, and also with people with autism. So I always been interested in work with people, and the educational, pedagogical, development in that. And I personally, I prefer to work like 1-to-1. As a teacher, you are like 1-to-20 or 30 sometimes, but
Mhm.
I prefer that 1-to-1 contact. And yeah, and the coaching, yeah, I guess I have to mention Tony Robbins, since I guess he was one of the first, yeah, famous coaches that I that I got, to know, not personally, but I did read some of his books and a course and so on. So that was like kind of interesting to me, that you can get results, by using these techniques. And then I applied for the basic uh, course in Denmark, and I find it that very interesting, and then I did the master course, after, and I don't regret it. Yeah, I think that's also important to mention that I think that there's a like personal development aspect in this, and through doing these exercises and getting into the whole philosophy, you can say, of coaching and NLP. There's a lot of personal development in that. But there's also, if you want to use it as a professional, of course, there's also a professional side, to it. So I guess I can see myself, in both camps.
Mm, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued, why physical illness? Why is injury and you know physical ill health?
Yeah.
What's drawn
I
you to
I, I
that?
mean I have a past myself, as a runner, and I also played football, so I have encountered, in injuries myself in my life, and I just remember that I wished that I had, some tools or someone to help me, overcome these difficulties, these difficult days, and it was really heavy for me, mentally and psychologically. It was really hard, and so that I guess it was like a combination of my own experiences, and then given this new, sets of this new toolbox, so I could kind of see it, that
Yes. Yeah.
it fit together, and yeah. And then I mean, professionally, it's also good to have like a niche or like a target, that you kind of, okay, this is what I'm going to aim at as a professional coach, so
Mm.
of course there's also some business, yeah, what do you say, ideas behind it,
Hmm. Brilliant.
and personal. So it's personal and business. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so we'll probably mention this towards the end of the podcast as well, but if there are people listening and watching who have some interest in or have some experience in applying holistic approaches to physical conditions, that would be of interest to you, I'm sure. Um, but let's
Mhm.
go on first to or next, I should say, into thinking about the two particular elements of NLP that I know that interest you particularly. And one of them is around the beliefs that we have and how, when they're not particularly useful beliefs, or maybe they're old beliefs, they can hold us
Yeah.
back.
Right.
What can you tell us about that, and Lars?
Yeah. I mean, we all have limiting beliefs, and belief systems that we are not necessarily aware of, because this often operate on like a more like subconscious, level. So we are not really aware of how the power of these beliefs, that
Mm.
and the control really it has in our lives, So, to give an example, it can be a young woman who had two or three bad experiences with previous boyfriends, and then come up with the conclusion or the belief that all men, are, in a certain way, bad for her, or she doesn't want to find, a new boyfriend and a husband, based on maybe two or three experiences. So it's a kind of, you can also call it generalizations, that we kind of generalize what we experience to make sense out of what's going on, and often to protect ourselves. And that's often the case, that these beliefs, the purpose is really to protect ourselves, which can be good in a certain context, but in other contexts it will have a limiting effect, in our lives. So I think it's really yeah, it's always, how do you say, liberating, when you kind of dive into this and find out, when these beliefs helps us and when they do the opposite, because they are not either good or bad in themselves. It depends on the context and how they are used, or how, yeah. So
Mm.
I think that, yeah, I see myself as a facilitator, that I will can help people, yeah, maybe dive into these questions, no?
Mm. It sounds, in a couple of things that you said sounded really interesting to me there.
Yeah,
Firstly, the notion that we're not aware of many of the beliefs that we hold
no,
because they've all, I mean, we know that the beliefs are not true, They're
Mm.
just formed, as you said, from the information that we've gathered. And of course, NLP tells us that we take this information in through our senses, and because
Mm.
it's so vast, we have to filter it and collate it and gather it and store it in a way that our brain can manage it and kind of
Exactly.
organize it.
Exactly. Right.
And then, of course, if we've had a particular experience, we then go and search for, without being consciously aware of it necessarily, search for information that confirms that belief to be true.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
that's a good point. You
so
know.
we might filter out
Yeah.
information that
Exactly.
would
Yeah.
counter it, if you like.
That's yeah, and that's exactly how we um are creators, of our own reality, but often in a, subconscious, you know, fashion, we're not necessarily conscious about what's happening,
Mm,
And I think also as a coach, it's about helping the client, connecting, the conscious level with the subconscious level, because so they can work together. Because often when we suffer, or when we cannot really overcome, a challenge, or it often has to do with internal conflicts. Maybe a part of me want to go and find a partner, but there's a subconscious part that wants to protect me, for example. So that would be an inner conflict, so then it's important to kind of reconnect these different parts, into one, so they can, work together, in a shared strategy, and really experience the power, of connection or reconnection. No?
hmm Yeah,
So
that's a really useful explanation, I think.
yeah, yeah,
And there's also this notion, isn't there, that um, I think you said it before, that there's nothing about us, whether it's subconscious or unconscious, that has a malicious intent by any means.
no,
Um, and I know very often when you and I have done exercises together, it's um, it's quite often the case that safety or protection or security are the things that are at the back of behaviors or beliefs that we have. And whilst that belief might have served us at one time when we had perhaps no other resource, when we were younger, we had no other
hmm
developed qualities to enable us to do things in a different way, that it served us well. But perhaps we find
exactly,
now that now
yeah,
that we're in a different context, it no longer serves us.
no. I've also heard the analogy with um, software, like it's outdated software that needs to be updated, no?
Yes,
So it has kind of served us in a certain time of life, and now it's time to get an update, of this
yes,
software.
yeah.
So
That's a really neat metaphor. Yes.
then it's
Just
more,
thinking about your interest in people who have injuries or physical illnesses that they're seeking to recover from. I
yeah,
guess there could be competing beliefs that they might not be aware of about recovery.
right,
So on the one hand, there's a
yeah,
part of them that really does want to recover, and on the other hand, there may be a part that doesn't
yeah,
for a different reason.
right. What comes to mind is, I think all of us, myself included, have experience with being, in a victim position, a victimized position, and actually, there there can be a lot of good things or sides to that, that you get extra care and extra attention, and you know, yeah. So then people, treat the kind of tend to treat you in a certain way. Um, So, and if you've been in that position for a long time, it can be difficult to leave it. Also because of the familiarity, it's something you know, it's something you identify with.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it doesn't really serve you so well if you have to recover physically, then you really have to take control and responsibility, for your life and for your recovery, So I think it would be relevant to work with that, and on a identical level, that's really, I think, where the change really has the most effect,
Mm.
because um, so that would be relevant, and also, anxiety, stress, depression, very common,
Mm.
that to see that in relation to recovery, so
Yes, I was
yeah,
listening to a very interesting recording. I think it was on the Ether and Alchemy podcast series by a guy called Jorgen Rasmussen, and he has quite a radical view on depression. But I'm trying to think how he worded it. Essentially, he's saying that a lot of people who are um, in depression don't view it as a process, but view it as part of their identity. And he says
right,
even just calling it, you're depressing yourself,
yeah,
or I am depressing currently, makes it more
mm,
of a verb, makes it more transitory and a doing thing rather than
right,
something that's done to or an experience that you're having,
exactly,
and it
yeah,
changes the dynamics of it.
yeah. I think it's called externalization. You kind of externalize, um, yeah, depression.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yes. Gosh, that
um,
could be a very large subject matter to talk about, couldn't it? But
yeah,
maybe, Lars, if you wouldn't mind, if we could move to talking about the other area of NLP that I know that you're fascinated by, and that is our individual maps of the world. So tell us
yeah,
how what maps of the world are and how these relate to your interest in your niche of helping people with
yeah.
physical
I
practice.
mean, yeah, it our maps of the world. It basically is like what we experience, um, is not really, how do you say, objective. We experience reality through filters. So so even though we would have the same experience, for example, in a car accident, because we have different maps of reality, we would experience that car accident differently. So maybe I would see it as a source of suffering, and you would see it as a source of growth, for example, just to give an example.
Mm,
So I think that this is very a short explanation, but I think that by working with yeah, again, our belief systems, but also the map of the world, it is related, that we can kind of shift the mindset, from to in the area of recovering, I would say really learning, and then control and responsibility and so on.
mm,
I think that would be keywords, and
mm,
instead of being a victim of circumstances.
mm. Yes.
So
So
yeah,
understanding how that individual is perceiving
yeah,
that
and see
experience.
the world, and a bit of
Mm,
history, what have shaped that, yeah, belief systems of the world. How is the map? How does that work? And also find the limitations, so we can kind of, transform these limitations, no,
mm.
or expand them. And
Yes.
then the reality will also expand. It so has all about has to do with how we perceive things. From a
Yes.
limiting perspective, or how do you say, a broad self-empowering perspective. No.
Yes. Do you know, it's a
Yeah.
while since I've heard that explanation actually, Lars, or just that kind of description. I've I know about maps of the world and how different we perceive things, but I hadn't for a while considered how um, through NLP exercises and through challenges to the way that we think, we can reshape our map or we can
Mm.
add more roads and
Color, yeah,
color and
colors and
whatever to the map.
explanations, and yeah,
Mm,
it's really how it works.
yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant. Well, believe it or not, we are coming very close to the end of our time together on this
yeah,
particular episode. We may have to do another one, I think, Lars. But I've just got
yeah.
three questions to finish with, if I may. And the first one is, what do you have particular success with in relation to NLP?
Um, what do I have particularly?
Oops, we've lost Lars for a second there. Are you still there, Lars? Oh, so sorry that we lost you there temporarily, Lars. What we were talking about was what particular success that you have in relation to NLP.
Yeah, I can really see that that the tools of NLP can really help people overcome their challenges, and I'm also amazed how wise the body is, when we really start to listen to ourselves and our own wisdom. It's often amazing, what kind of answers surface, that really wants to help us. So I think that the short answer is really when we start to work with the subconscious mind, and really start, help my clients connect the conscious mind with the subconscious mind. That's really where I see successful results.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a
And
really
and again, I'm a coach. I'm not a consultant, or so it's not like I give the answers. The answers comes, from the client. It's so I kind of help facilitate these answers. So
yes.
that's I'm really so surprised, how resourceful we are.
There's that word again. It's brilliant,
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
that
I
is.
yeah, I completely agree with you there because it's still even when I think about it now, blows my mind that there's only such a small amount of activity really going on consciously and so much more going on automatically and unconsciously and subconsciously
Yeah,
in our beings. It's incredible.
yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. Uh I don't know whether you kind of answered my next question, but let's see. What one thing would you want coaches to take away about NLP from the conversation that we've had today?
That that really that we create our own reality. So therefore, our reality is really a construction. You can also say a social construction, because of course, it's also constructed, in interaction with our surroundings. But since it is a construction or social construction, why don't we build like a positive, house or construction that can really help us, instead of the opposite, you
Hmm.
know? And sometimes we need help to reconstruct or renovate, our house or our thoughts, to really live the life we want to live, full on. That's really what it's about.
Yes, that's such an important message in the current
Yeah.
state of our world, I think. So thank you for that. And Lars, how can people reach you in your coaching practice? I'm just thinking people might be sitting and listening and thinking, I'd love to get involved. I'd love to connect with Lars, to start thinking with him about this idea he's got of holistic support for people with physical conditions and recovery. How do they get in contact with you?
But I will leave some information, so they can reach out to me if they see this podcast and find it interesting to reach out. I will leave relevant contact information.
Perfect. So we'll make sure that's on the episode description.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Right. So unfortunately, we do have to draw this to a close, Lars. So my enormous thanks go to you, Lars Osterby. Thank you for sharing your life lessons in NLP, especially around the concepts of the map of the world and limiting beliefs on 2020 Coaching Convos. And to 2020 podcast followers, if you enjoyed the episode, please do go ahead and share and subscribe, get in contact with Lars, and tell me what you want to hear more about in 2020 Coaching Convos with me, Julie Crabb. Till next time.